Hey everyone, this is Cam Garrity. Welcome back to This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Today on the show we have one of my favorite people who I've ever had the pleasure of being a teammate with, Adrienne Bermingham. Adrienne is the National Program Director of Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots, which is the global humanitarian youth program within the Jane Goodall Institute. And she has an incredible role where she bolsters and empowers kids, these amazing young environmentalists who are trying to make the world a healthier and safer place for all of us to live in. Now, Adrienne and I first met through TEDx Buffalo. She was one of my coaches when I gave my TEDx talk in 2013. She had started volunteering as a TEDx organizer after she gave her own TEDx talk in 2012. And then I had such a great time getting to know her and everyone else there that I started volunteering. So we got to work together planning these conferences for over 3 years and just had the best time doing so. It sounds strange to say, but we actually had a really good time talking in this episode through some pretty heavy topics. Things like how she struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety, remaining resilient through times of trauma, and starting her new journey as a single mom. Since we recorded this chat back in September, she's launched an amazing TikTok channel, which she's using to share original poetry and document this new emergence phase that she's going through right now. This should have been a phone call with my Phoenix friend, Adrienne Bermingham. So how are the boys?
They're wonderful. I am having such a cool experience with my firstborn. I had postpartum anxiety and a touch of postpartum depression that I wouldn't have known to call that until almost 6 months after he was born. And I suppose I just expected the same thing to happen again. But much to my delight, it did not. And from the moment my second was born, I felt a bond with him, and we have just been basking in each other.
That's amazing. Obviously I'm not a parent, so I don't really have a concept of this, but what is it like, you spend 9 months growing a human inside of you only to end up having like these mental health issues where it makes it harder to connect. I can't imagine that.
The first time around, people, well-meaning friends and family who had children will share their experiences, their advice. They'll say things. It's interesting thinking back. I wanted to hear from people before I had my first. I wanted to hear, it's going to be wonderful. Every moment is bliss. And I wasn't hearing that. And it was overwhelming while I was still pregnant to hear people say, your life's going to change. It's going to be really tough. And I found myself wondering, like, why are you telling me this? This isn't useful to me. I'm about to be a mom. And there's no stopping this train.
I need optimism.
I need to know that everything is going to be okay. But then, now coming out of it a bit wiser, I'm actually really grateful. I was cursing them out at the time, but the honesty was so important to me when I found myself experiencing the postpartum anxiety and depression, being able to recall what people had said to me, and then I was able to reach back out to those people specifically and ask them questions about what they had been describing. Like, it was them opening a door to a conversation that I didn't know I was going to need to have later. So yeah, it's tough. People were saying things like, I remember somebody saying to me, don't be scared if you don't feel that you've bonded with your baby right away. And I thought at the time, like, well, that's wild. That's never going to happen to me. You know,
How could I not? Yeah.
I am, you know, I'm decorating nurseries. I'm imagining, you know, playing sports in the backyard. Like every moment of this pregnancy was planned, and I want this child so deeply. So the minute that he's born, I'm going to be just overcome with joy. And when in fact that did happen to me, I didn't realize it, but I can now look back and say that my bonding moment with my firstborn wasn't until he was at least 3 or 4 months old. I always adored and loved and cared for him. But for the first couple months of his life, I was just figuring out who I was all of a sudden. And, you know, when you're keeping a newborn alive, it's really all you can do. So, you know, any sense of who you were before that moment is unreachable. And that's kind of something I think that pushed me into a place of anxiety, was not knowing when I was going to be able to recognize myself again, which I'm happy to say I did. You know, I got there, as most parents I think do. But the first time around, not knowing when the expiration is on the unfamiliar, you know, uncertain period, it's scary not knowing when it ends.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, it's funny, you saying those words, obviously it's a completely different scenario, but it kind of reminds me of when COVID started off, and you think like, oh no, it's just going to be like a week or two or something, and we'll then all be back to normal, like we expected to uproot. And then it's months and months of like, oh, this is it. Oh, okay. Now I need to rethink how I'm going to live my life and make it a part of who I am, and bending with it without breaking yourself.
And here we are more than a year later, and we're still kind of figuring that out.
Right. And I imagine going back for a sec, those people who were giving you advice, in hindsight, probably were sugarcoating it a little bit and telling an optimistic version of what they went through by comparison. And you were, once you had that experience, be able to empathize and appreciate the advice even more.
You're so right. And I think, I mean, I've been telling folks that I really came into myself in motherhood. Looking back, I'm not sure I knew where I wanted my life to go, and I still don't know the answer to that question, but I have become comfortable in my season of motherhood. I feel so fulfilled every day in this role in a way that I really hoped I would be in my career and in other elements of my life. But in the same way that you don't know when you're in it, I look back and I see that I wasn't as fulfilled as I am now. And I refer to it as my season of motherhood because I still have other dreams and I still have other goals for my life. But it's not even that they're on pause. That's a way that some people refer to it. They're not on pause. They're still there. And they're every part of who I am as an ambitious person. But right now, my day-to-day is, you know, being a mom, and I find a lot of joy and satisfaction in it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've never heard that phrase, the season of motherhood, but I really love that and respond to it. I wonder, has the way Ozzy responds and views to the pandemic recontextualize it all, how you've dealt with COVID? Because I would imagine for him, you know, we're what, 18, 19 months into this. That's the majority of his life, unfortunately. But like, so for him, it's just like normal. I mean, and I'm sure he doesn't quite realize to the degree what we're in, but like, has that made you appreciate it more or understand like that it just is what it is and we adapt to that too? Or
do you know, my experience So yeah, I think I have two COVID kids. Ozzy was 6 months old when in that week of March 2020 when things started shutting down. And interestingly, my family and I were on a work trip for my job. So we were in Miami, Florida, when and the benchmark that I use, or the critical moment I knew everything was changing, is when I'm not a basketball fan, but I think it's when they decided March Madness was done. They were just I think that's what happened. And I remember seeing that on the news reel at a restaurant while we were in Miami and thinking, like, wow, this is really happening. And then, the subsequent thought of, like, we better get home. So Ozzy was 6 months old when that happened. And, his entire experience has been blanketed by, COVID life. For me, I like to think I had the most wonderful year. I mean, my life, whereas other people may have experienced, being within the same four walls every day and kind of struggling to, connect with themselves and with others in the way that they're used to. My life was different every day. I mean, with a 6-month-old, I was experiencing, extraordinary growth and learning through this little child who was, while we were, locked in, we were learning to walk. We were learning to talk. We were smiling and laughing for the first time. So for me, I felt, really blessed. My walls weren't changing, but my experience was different every single day. And he sees the world with such wonder. And like you said, there's no way of really knowing if this is a result of him being at home so much in the first year of his life, or if this is just who he would have been no matter what. But we're just now, recently, when I got vaccinated, we were feeling more confident to, go sit at a restaurant. And we just did that for the first time. And so he, the wonder on this kid's face when he sees all of these people that he doesn't know and he sees what other families look like, it's been really special. Of course, now we're coming to a point again where we might need to reel it back in. But it's been special.
TEDx Buffalo, when you and I were working on that together, doesn't seem that long ago necessarily, but at the same time, like in your case, it's literally 2 lifetimes ago.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about what, brought us to this moment of having this conversation and thinking back to TED. And it does feel like another life, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember so when you and I were first connected, I was, I think, just in the role of being a speaker coach on the planning committee. And I remember watching your submission to speak and knowing immediately, and now we're looking at, hundreds of applications and videos and trying to wean through them and having really critical conversations, like critical discussions about, like, does this fit here, and asking all these questions. I remember watching your video and knowing right away that this was meant for the TED stage, and I wouldn't let us pass on over it. And I remember saying, like, I want to be Cam's speaker coach. And here we are. It was an excellent performance.
That means the world to hear. I so love that time. I think about, I regret how nervous I was about giving a TED Talk. I don't know if you feel the same way. Like, I was just such a bundle of nerves that I really wish I could have that experience back again and just enjoy it a little bit more. But no, I fell in love with that team. And, you and Nick Guy and Kevin Purdy and all those folks. I just loved them so much.
Such good people. And, you are not the first person I've heard say that about the nerves, but also I think it's really common when I talk to people who spoke on the stage years later, they're certain that they would have given a better talk on a different topic.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't think that would apply to you because you really spoke about your life's work and passion. But it's interesting. And I think it applies to me because I did speak on the stage and I think now about, the journeys that I've gone on in my life. I think that's probably the case for the people who've said that to me is, we're always moving, we're always learning and changing. And, there are many talks that each of us could give.
Adrienne, weird question. What's a physical possession that you've had the longest?
Easy. Her name is Dolly Cakes.
Love it already.
She's a Cabbage Patch Kid. I'm told she was given to me by my godmother when I was a year old. She, if you know Cabbage Patch, she has the butt flap that I think most Cabbage Patch dolls have.
Like on like the pajamas or something? Or
well, she doesn't have clothing that comes off, but she's got, I don't know why, the Cabbage Patch Kids have like a butt flap where you can pull down the back of their pants and there's a butt there.
Okay.
To me as a child, that was a pocket for special treasures.
Better
So
theirs than yours.
Maybe that's why they created it that way. But we've got really great pictures of me as a child with Dolly Cakes. She went everywhere with me, and apparently it was a really hot, fun game for my brothers to steal her and hide her. And my parents tell me. But she's still around. She does not look good these days, but she's still around.
Do you have a favorite fictional character that you really empathize with?
That's an interesting question. So I am a person born in 1989 and came of age with Harry Potter. And so that story has stayed with me since I was, I think, 5th grade is when I first read it. I'm not sure so much there's a character that I particularly identify with, but in a way, when you're 10 and 11 and 12 years old, you're figuring out who you are and where you fit with your friend group. And for somebody like me, who I think I was pretty quiet, when I was 10 years old, my grandmother who lived with us passed away. And she was, as I remember referring to her, my best friend at the time. So I think the story, Harry Potter characters filled a gap for me when I lost my grandmother. And so they kind of, helped me grow up in a way that I think they helped a lot of kids my age grow up and get through middle school and high school.
Yeah, I could certainly relate to that because I was totally a Harry Potter kid. How I'm curious because how has your relationship changed with the books or the franchise since J.K. Rowling has reared her ugly, bigoted head?
I try to separate because I have such a strong connection to the story.
Yeah.
And I always think about, like, the world building that she did through her writing was so incredible. I mean, and then the actual world building that happened, in our world. You can go and stand outside of a place that looks like this place you imagined. So I try to separate it and whenever possible not buy things that will put money in her pocket. Yeah. That's my form of resistance.
I'm forever grateful that I already own all of the movies and books physically. So that, it's as little... Yes. As little going to her as possible. Yeah,
disappointing, but I think my way of surviving through her rearing her ugly head is, like I said, just kind of trying to separate them. And I hope that that's okay. It's such a special part of my story growing up that I don't want to let it go.
Right.
So I'm just going to keep it for myself.
Yeah, and not only, like, of course, the story, but also, like, she was a role model, too, for a long time. I don't know if you felt the same way, but, like, just as for me, as someone who wanted to write and tell stories and like just in general make something of themselves. Like she was a great testament to that. And that's
You're
been a shame
right.
too.
I remember hearing that, because you hear stories about extraordinary people doing extraordinary things at a young age, and she was somebody who, wasn't very young when she wrote her story, and she was I think she was a mom, and so you're right. She herself was an inspiration. So it is a loss.
What do you wish you weren't scared of as a kid, looking back now?
I feel like I have two answers. The funny answer is that I was deeply traumatized by E.T., the movie. I mean,
Understood.
I'm not sure what circumstances led me to having night terrors featuring that little poop-looking alien, but I imagine I just was too young when I saw it.
Yep.
Because, and to this very day, I have not rewatched the movie, so I'm told that he is like a docile, friendly alien, but I have not seen the movie since I was very, very young, and I simply remember the night terrors where it was very specific. If my feet were too warm, he would come out of the closet and get me.
Oh no.
I would hear the blood pumping in my ears, and that would be the marching of his footsteps. And there was a version of this nightmare where I would run down the hall to tell my parents that he was coming, and I would try to talk, and I would have no voice because he stole it. So, I certainly wish I could undo all of that trauma.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Also, the music is beautiful. I always listen to John Williams radio on Spotify, and I hear the E.T. song, and I'm like, wow, this is so pretty. And then somebody tells me it's the E.T. song, and
you're like, oh, damn.
The moment is ruined. But the other thing I kind of wish, and I'm seeing it in my 2-year-old now, I remember being a bit of a performer. My parents would get me the tap shoes, and there was this little square of concrete in our living room where there used to be a fireplace. So there's just a square of concrete, and I would get my tap shoes on and do a dance for my family. And they would laugh lovingly, probably because I was a cute little 4-year-old who didn't know how to tap dance, and I was just clacking around. But I remember feeling betrayed by their laughter and feeling like I'm, what a strong emotion for a young kid to have. But I remember feeling like I'm doing this special thing and you're laughing at me. And I feel like that became something through the rest of my life. Like this caution of, wondering, are people laughing at me or with me? Do I want to do something if I don't think I'm the best at it? I think it kind of grew into a couple of things. And like I said, I see it a bit with my 2-year-old because he's at the age now where he says really adorable things incorrectly, and does really goofy dances, and I laugh at him because I adore it, and he gets a little look of embarrassment on his face. I think a little bit is normal. I think most people experience it, but
sure. And it's certainly, like, from an adult standpoint, and in your case, it's not coming from a place of malice in the littlest bit. But yeah, I so empathize with that feeling of, are they laughing with me or at me?
I try to take strong lessons from my own life and imagine how I can apply what I've learned for my kids. So the fact that I'm recognizing this emotion in my son, I'm hoping that I can, guide him through it. And I would love to give him the freedom to, dance like no one's watching for the rest of his life.
What's a piece of advice that you think your past self would give to you today? Besides, don't laugh at Ozzy when he screws up a word.
I find myself at this very moment in a very unexpected place in my life. So it's kind of putting an air of uncertainty on a lot of the things that I thought to be true about myself. I'm kind of going through Well, I'm hoping to be going through a phoenix phase where I come back to life. Hopefully, maybe breathing some fire. But I think, I'm not sure how to answer that. I think one of my strongest qualities, and I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, is my resiliency. That I just I've always been able to trust myself that I'm going to come out of tough spots. Like the best way I can describe what I'm experiencing right now is I'm in a very tough, unexpected place. And I know that I'm not going to stay here. I know, like the hand that I'm being dealt currently is nothing I would ever have expected or wanted. It's, there's a dark cloud over me right now, but I know that the sun's going to break. I don't know if it's going to be next month or in a year, but I know I'm not going to stay here because I simply can't. I simply cannot live the rest of my life under this cloud. And that's something that I have always been good at. It's something I felt happening in my postpartum anxiety and depression after Ozzy was born. And that to me was a very difficult time because there were moments when I didn't see the clouds breaking, but the logical part of my mind and the strength of my heart, it was still there, but I maybe couldn't hear the voice saying, like, you are going to get through this. I just knew that I would. And it's something that led me, currently I'm serving as a volunteer mentor for another postpartum mother who is struggling. And it's something that I sought out about 7-8 months after Ozzy was born. I knew I'd come out of that dark place, and I wanted to connect with others and show them or help guide them if I could out of that and say, like, yeah, I was in a really tough place, but I came out of it and I know that you can too, and I want to help you by showing you what that can look like. So I suppose going back to your question, I think just a reminder for my future self, my current self, that strength is going to be there always. Because even in the moments I wasn't sure it was there, it still was.
Moving into how are you really, which is sometimes the scary part of the show. I think about, you've talked already about dealing with the need to be resilient as yourself, and because of things that have presented as you've become a parent. Do you find that motherhood compounds the anxiety and the need to be resilient? I mean, I think about the fact that, like, persevering is hard enough on your own when you're single, or you're just by yourself, but now you have a whole other human that you need to be present for and be resilient for. Like, are you ever present of that responsibility? Is that not something, like, do you not see it that way, or is it, how do you live with that experience or those thoughts, or don't you?
Do you know what? It makes it easier.
Really?
Because it's, I can do hard things on my own, but the metaphor that just popped into my brain is like when you're laying in bed in the morning and your alarm goes off. If it's just you that has to get up for that alarm, or you've said to yourself, I'm going to go to the gym at 6 a.m. and the alarm goes off and you're like, well, I don't, I'm tired. I don't think I'm going to go. But if there's someone there waiting for you, the trainer at the gym, your gym buddy is waiting for you, you're going to get your ass out of bed and go. And so I'm not sure why that metaphor came into my mind.
No, it works perfect though. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But, I can always do hard things, but when the boys are involved, there's just no question. You do them, and you don't think twice. And for me, and this might be a unique experience. I would be curious to hear what other parents, especially single parents, hear or think about it. But for me, it's not a burden so much as a motivator. And there are very difficult days when, especially with 2 young kids, they're both in diapers. There's mornings where it feels just like keeping children alive. But at the end of the day, I try very hard to remember that keeping children alive and myself is a great triumph.
Yeah.
And thus a successful day was had. But yeah, when you've got your little gym buddies in their diapers, there's just no stopping you. There's no other option.
No, I love that. And I think about, I think surviving is something I've grown a whole new appreciation for again in this last year. Cause I think about what's transpired since March of 2020, and would have thought I'd be further along with any number of things in my life. But then I was talking with my therapist, and I said this, like, gosh, I thought I would have done more. And he was like, well, there's been a global pandemic. Are your grandparents still alive? Are your, the core members of your family, are they all still there? Like you did that. And that's more than enough. And so,
Absolutely.
You must feel the same way. I really respond to that.
Yeah.
So in preparing for today, I did a little Google deep dive. And I knew that you did a lot of writing for work. I had never realized that you wrote like as an artist. You wrote some really beautiful pieces.
Well, thank you.
How long have you been doing that?
I find that I write when I'm going through something, almost exclusively. If I am happy, content, every day is sunshine and rainbows kind of person, the words weren't coming. But I found the phases I can recall are, even I mentioned my grandmother's passing when I was 10. I have some primitive poetry that I wrote when I was 10 years old about her passing. So even back that far, when the emotions boil up within me, they spill out that way. But the times that I can recall in my adult life would be relationships in college. My first love, who in retrospect was emotionally abusive and manipulative. That was very powerful emotion for me as an 18-year-old. So I wrote a lot at that time. I wrote a lot when I met my soon-to-be ex-husband, because my love for him was profound. There we go. And I wrote a lot after my kids were born. And that's kind of a place I'm finding myself at now. I'm going to try not to be emotional about it, because that doesn't make for good conversation.
No, but it makes for honest conversation.
True.
It sounds like you use that as a therapy, that writing process. Is it something that you write to find the words, or is it more of a thing that you've marinated on what you're going through in a way, and you use the writing process to sort of finally put those words down and reflect on what you've been going through?
I think it's the latter. I find the way it happens is I'll find myself feeling a powerful feeling. And one of my favorite things that I ever wrote was a piece of poetry for my first Mother's Day, which would have been May. My son would have been like 10 months, I think. And I found myself, waking up Mother's Day feeling like just feeling these emotions of like what it had meant to become a mother, and what I felt like this different person than I was a year prior. And I just started writing, and and the words end up rhyming. But for me, it does feel like a way to, because the emotion I'm feeling is so powerful, it's something I want to be able to share, and just explaining it in conversation doesn't feel like it's doing it justice. Just talking about, this strong feeling I'm having versus creating some sort of, beautiful thing to read back to myself or to share with others. That feels like a better representation of an emotion.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, I wonder if you feel the same way, but like there's an intentionality behind that. If you're taking the time to craft the words, if you're taking the time to rhyme, mm-hmm. You're really doing to borrow a Jesuit phrase, an examine on what's going on, as opposed to just capturing a moment on a cell phone, or texting someone like, oh, today's been great, this happened or that happened, or anything.
Yeah, I wonder if you would let me read my favorite one.
I would love that.
Okay, let me see. I wish I was someone who could confidently, and maybe I will be someday, stand up on a stage and read my poetry, but I'm gonna ask you to allow me to use this as my stage for a moment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is what I wrote for my first Mother's Day. There is nothing I wouldn't do for you, my son. I'll give you my arms to rest and explore in, to bravely let go of there if you need them. I'll give you my eyes, once focused and choring. I'll leave them upon you, watchful, adoring. I'll give you my mind, fill it only with you. Let it worry and wonder about the things you will do. I'll give you my heart, let it burst from my chest. When you go, take it with you, a piece of me stretched. I'll give you my time if you need a bit more. If it means I'll age faster, I'll still trade it for yours. I'll give you my dreams, may they guide and empower. For once they were mine, now they are ours.
That's beautiful, Adrienne.
Thank you. I remember the feeling that morning, the beginning when it says, I'll give you my arms. That is the feeling I found myself stewing in that morning. Was I am the mother of a small child who cannot yet, let me think of when this was, could not yet walk, who was unsteady and needed me to hold him almost all the time. And I found myself feeling that I didn't have my arms. They were being used by somebody else. And that was the feeling I was trying to describe, because it sounds like it's not a good thing to not have your arms. And it was hard, even something as simple as, any mom will tell you, any parent will tell you, brushing your teeth, washing your hair, eating food that sustains your body is very difficult to do as a parent. And it's hard, but my arms were needed elsewhere. And that's the feeling I found that morning. And that's how I wrote that.
I love it. No, and there's a duality there too, because like all of motherhood, you're not only willing to give any part of yourself to them, but at the same time, you've already done that, right? Because their arms are your arms, like, and they have your eyes, and they, mm-hmm. all these factors of, they're already a part of you, but you're still willing to give more. And I think that piece really captures all of that sentiment in just a really lovely way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me read it.
So I watched your TEDx Buffalo talk again this morning, and you read a lovely piece at the beginning of that as well. But I'm not sure that you remember, but I should say I'm sure you remember. But you ended your presentation by challenging the audience to be the change that you wish to see in our city. And I think about the fact that that 22-year-old Adrienne Bermingham would go on in just the next year and over the, following 3 or 4 years to like be working with or running TEDx Buffalo, and then to say nothing of all the things that you went on to do with Roots and Shoots. Would you consider that like an instance where you're listening to your own advice?
What a great question. I am somebody who, so that time I look back on all of those experiences so fondly. Through my work with Roots and Shoots, the mission of the program is to give young people the tools to be better stewards of the environment, better citizens of their communities and of the earth, so that we can, counteract the bad things that are happening in our world, specifically to the animals that we share it with and the environment that we all depend on to survive. So through my work, I meet incredible young people, kind of throwing back to when we were talking about J.K. Rowling. These are young people who some are as young as like 8 years old, who have a very specific passion. For example, a young person who is entranced by turtles. I want to save the turtles. And this is just an example that I'm recalling from memory, but this young 8-year-old has done work that has impacted turtles and is making a difference and has raised their voice on behalf of the turtle population. And so I meet all of these incredible young people who many have a singular passion that they're pouring their talents into and having an impact on that, species or that cause. And for a long time, at the beginning of my work, I've been with the Jane Goodall Institute for 10 years now. At the beginning, I remember feeling that I was deficient in some sort of way because I didn't have a singular passion. It was, I wasn't fixated upon giraffes or food deserts. I wasn't pouring all my energy into one cause that I could identify. And for a couple of years, I remember meeting these people and so unfortunately feeling that deficiency in myself when really I should have just been celebrating those people before me for their own merits. But I kind of had an epiphany one day, and I don't remember the exact moment it happened, but I remember starting to feel like my support of these young people is my service. And I found such peace in that revelation. And, suddenly selfishly, part of me is thinking like, well, I've got all these passions now, right? I've got all these kids I'm supporting and I'm helping to lift up their dreams. And so now I've got turtles and giraffes and food deserts.
you get to be a catalyst for their success. And like, you just give them the platform to do whatever.
And I take no credit for their incredible things, but I am just so humbled and honored that I get to be just one small stepping stone in their journey. So if one thing that I did or one conversation that we had helped that young person along their path to being, the next Jane Goodall, or the first of his or her name, then I found my purpose in my career that way.
And, that's really big of you to not see yourself as a part of their story. But I'm sure if we were to ask any one of those kids, they would say, oh, gosh, I couldn't have done it without Adrienne.
Well, I don't know if they'd say that. I'd be so honored if they did. But I do have the distinct pleasure of hearing from many of them and feeling such pride that they remember me playing a role. It is a really wonderful feeling. And isn't that something we should all get from our work?
What do you think, and you've sort of described this already as you were talking about the advice that your past self might give you, but what do you think about your life right now that your past self would be proudest of about where you are right now or most excited for? So
it's a tough question because, as I've referenced, I'm at a crossroads in my life. And the shortest version of this story is that I now have two sons, Ozzy, who is 2 years old, and Rudy, who is 2.5 months old. And my husband was having an affair. So I am at a place in my life now where I'm not sure what my future is going to look like. You know, I'm like many before me who, had started to build a little family. I imagined exactly how the next 50, 60 years would look. And they're not going to look at all like I imagined. So the question that you're asking, I'm not sure I have the answer to right now. I'm in a place of transformation. It's been only 2-3 short months since that ball was dropped on me, and already I've felt, growth and triumph amidst, the grief. So that's, I think, it's cliche to say day to day, but, people ask me how I'm doing, and my answer is, I've got good days and bad days and great days and sad days, but I know that I'm not going to stay in sadness. So I guess here's my answer then, is that I can't wait to see what happens. I suppose that might be my open door, is that I had painted a picture for my future, and as hard as it is to see that picture wiped away, there is a certain excitement for a blank canvas, and that's my resiliency speaking.
No, yeah.
Because I can't be afraid. I can't be afraid of the blank canvas, because it is what I've been given, and that is the moment that any person can face with paintbrush or a lighter. And I'm going to just go at it with the paintbrushes, because the other option is not of interest to me,
Of course not. You have gym buddies waiting for you.
Exactly. And who knows what else?
Right.
That's what I suppose I'm getting at, is like anything can happen from here. And while that, freedom and uncertainty and blank canvas is nothing I ever would have signed up for, I have to, I know it's going to be good, because I am me. I am someone who finds good and wants good. So I know it will be. Just gotta it's like there's this really beautiful children's book that I have right now. We're going on a bear hunt. And it's very repetitive, and every page says, we can't go over it. We can't go under it. We've got to go through it. And that is what I'm doing right now. I have to go through it so that I can be through it.
Yeah.
And on the other side.
Right. Well, and giving yourself the time to feel all the feelings, whether it's the grief or the sorrow, or just being pissed off.
Yeah, and I think I intend to write about it, which is interesting. Going back to what you and I were talking about how usually the emotion boils up and then just happens to spill over into prose. For me right now, I feel as though I am probably going to write some sort of book, whether it just be for myself, for my kids. Maybe it's something I write and then, bury. But I feel empowered in my grief right now to reflect and write about it. Because, as I keep saying, I know there's going to be another side of it. So I asked my own therapist very recently. I said, I talked to her all about what's going on in my life. And I said to her, okay, you're a trauma therapist. How do I get through this trauma? And she said to me, Adrienne, you're in it. Okay, you don't need to be getting through it right now. You don't need to be processing it right now. You are still experiencing it. So just survive. And that was, a really nice moment of receiving permission to just survive right now. Yeah. And I think that's, if anything, that's the reminder I need to keep giving myself, is that in my determination to come out of this on the other side, I don't need to rush it. In fact, I'd be doing myself a disservice not to process and take care and time to get there.
I'm glad that you've been able to find that perspective, because it sure sounds like the healthy one. Yeah, it's just, it sucks. And I think it's really easy to, again, not the same scenario at all, but I spent a lot of time growing up, like, being a sick kid, and it's easy to only think about time as the past that you've conquered and the future which you've yet to experience. And it really is such an important thing to consider the present moment and consider the fact that you are still in a situation, that you can't debrief at any second, because, like you said, you're still in it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because that is, when you're in a tough spot like I currently am, there is a desire, deep desire to get to the other side of it. But, it doesn't matter how badly I want to. There is only now. And that is something, as I mentioned, my sons being motivators and reminders, and just, gosh, the lights of my day. Being that I had Rudy 2.5 months ago, amidst this revelation, it's like profound happiness and profound sadness and betrayal all at once. I remember feeling very quickly, recognizing I am not having postpartum anxiety and depression this time around. That's a win. And now I do not want this thing that's happening in my life, this negative thing, to steal a single moment of my joy with my newborn. And so I think in a pretty effective way, I've been able to compartmentalize these things. And I feel lucky, because when you see people out in the world, they all say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And most of the time you say, "Good, how are you?" But when I get asked that question, I feel so, just the overwhelming need to say that I'm not fine. How are you? And I feel lucky because I can just divert, coming out with my full story to a stranger or a person at the bank asking me how I am is not something I want to do. So I'm able to compartmentalize and answer, I am a new mother. I have a beautiful baby boy at home, and we are doing wonderfully. And so that is my way right now of speaking my truth, which I feel compelled to do because I am, overflowing with emotion, negative and positive. It is my way of speaking my truth and not unnecessarily unloading the rest of it on unknowing, polite inquirers.
Well, and I have to thank you, because I, without knowing any of this, I literally reached out to you a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, do you mind coming on a podcast where I ask people, how are you? No, wait, how are you really?" And you didn't just say, like, "Fuck off, Cam, I can't do this right now." And you've just been so gracious with your time and with your story and being honest. And, I know that people will find strength in your story, even if it's just you and me listening back to this. But
yeah, no, I appreciate you working with the plot twist that I brought to you, because as we've come to uncover in this conversation, talking about my emotions is an effective way for me to compartmentalize them, is an effective way for me to understand them myself. So I appreciate you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it when it is not at all what you expected for us to talk about, I don't think.
No, this I'm really, really glad we're doing this.
Someday when I write my book, this is going to be the first story in it. So my son Rudy, he was born at home accidentally. And looking back, there are a number of things that went on. So I sensed some strife in my home when I was about 8 months pregnant. My intuition said to me something's not right. I later found out, as revealed, that my husband was being unfaithful. I did not know at the time, but I was very, very pregnant. I was reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts to try to prep myself for my postpartum period. I was really trying to prepare myself mentally and emotionally to go through what I expected to be another difficult time upon having my newborn. Maybe some of that work that I did is the reason that I didn't experience any postpartum issues. I'm not sure, but I was trying to pour myself into my own mental health. But then I felt this other thing knocking around, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. So at about 8 months pregnant, I started having what are called Braxton Hicks contractions, which they call pretend fake practice contractions. The truth is that they don't hurt, but they are being effective. So 8 months pregnant, still got a month to go, and I'm feeling these practice contractions every day for what ended up being the remaining time of being pregnant. But it's almost as if the world knew the time was not right. I knew this thing was happening. I didn't know what this thing was in my marriage. And it's like my body and my mind were keeping this baby in until the right moment. Because what happened next was the most extraordinary thing that I've ever done and could have ever expected happening. And that is that the day that Rudy was born, I had a contraction that felt real at 9:00 p.m. and at 10:10 p.m. I was laying on the floor of the bathroom with my baby in my arms. So an hour and 10 minutes, I think, is what we clocked it at from first contraction to baby being born. We waited after he arrived. We waited 20 more minutes for an ambulance to show up. So he was swifter in his arrival. It's like a fifth of the time. Yeah. Than the emergency personnel. It was, like I said, the most triumphant. I have never felt so powerful, physically, emotionally. I just felt a sense of calm through the whole thing. Like I just knew everything was going to be okay. And it was. And the part that I can't believe happened. I'm being wheeled into the maternity ward on the gurney with my son in my arms. The doors fling open and all of the nurses are at the nurses' station and they're all clapping. They start clapping and everyone's smiling and I am just, I'm like, yes, I did do this. I deserve these claps.
I'll still take the epidural though.
Well, hang on. So they're clapping, they're smiling. My son is beautiful and I hear several voices saying, "Good job, Dad." Ugh. And and one person in the room had the wherewithal to say, "Good job, Mom."
Yeah.
And I was so busy with everything else physically going on for myself at the moment that I didn't snap back with the attitude that I should have. But I will never forget it. And it is now going to be something I just, that I call out when when it's time to talk about the patriarchy.
Seriously. Oh my God.
Yes. Rudy's father did an incredible thing in remaining calm and delivering the baby. Yes. But Rudy's mother grew the baby and delivered it with no epidural, as I so deeply had planned on requesting. Do you know, one more thing you just reminded me of is, so I live in the home that I grew up in. This home was purchased by my grandmother, who I referenced earlier, and her and my grandfather in like the 60s. It's a very old house, but it's a family institution, and I'm the lucky one of this generation that gets to raise my kids here. And my grandmother passed away in this house when I was 10. And my dad remembers, of course, moments like this. He remembers the sounds and the sights of that night when he, saw the emergency vehicles in the driveway, when, the sense of, loss, the shock of her passing in the home. And when I was about to give birth in the bathroom. So I called my dad and he came over, and later on he described to me how like this out of body experience that he had, which was like the full circle of the familiarity of the moment, the emergency vehicles in the driveway, the coming into the home at, many years ago, it was for the loss of the matriarch, but in this more recent moment, it was for the, the birth of a new baby boy.
And a new matriarch, I would argue. But
I would agree. I mean, that's more so now than I thought. But yeah, I don't know. It was just a beautiful thing the way he described the full circle moment of the loss and then the birth.
When they wrote the episode of Sesame Street, when Big Bird finds out that Mr. Hooper died, they specifically included the fact that the episode starts with them finding out that a baby has been born. Only for like midway through the episode, Big Bird learns about the loss of Mr. Hooper. And at the end, he finds like he gets to meet the baby. And they specifically wrote that to kind of hearken at the circle of life and how, as one goes, the next comes. And just you sharing that story, of course, reminded me of that.
Well, my young kids being into Sesame Street has built me a whole new relationship with the characters. And I very recently watched that episode and didn't know that that's the one that we were putting on.
Oh, no.
And I just, what an incredible show in that they deal with those heavy topics. But that one specifically is, everybody should watch it. It is incredible how they simplify is not the right word, but when you're speaking to young minds, that is what you have to do with really, really big things. And it's good to be reminded, even as an adult, that, sometimes it is that simple.
And I think their strength is in being able to be concise about things.
Yeah. Because
those ideas are so large and complex, but for them to, in so few words, convey what's happened and why it's happened, I continue to be blown away by. As we wrap up, I ask people sort of, how can we help? And for the listeners out there, what do you wish people placed a higher value on? Or just in general found more important in our world?
Well, my cause these days is mothers. I do believe that there are people who know how delicate a time it can be and give it the proper attention and value, but we, the collective, do not. And I'm clearly referencing things like maternity leave, paid family leave. It is atrocious to me that our country does not have maternity leave for mothers. It is to be a career-oriented person like I was and still am, and to witness what can happen, to experience the moment, however many days after birth, and recognize, okay, this is the day that somebody would have to go right back to work if they had no access to disability leave or no access to family leave. So that's, in some cases, the day after a baby is born. But then, a couple days later, this is the day someone would have to go back to work if they had a different kind of job. This is the day someone would have to go back to work if they only had 6 weeks disability. Thank goodness, here, see, now I'm on my soapbox. Thank goodness I live in New York State where we have paid family leave, and I currently, at this very moment, am still on maternity leave and have access to a total, through my work policy and the state policy, I think it's 18 weeks. I mean, new life has entered this world, a life that I grew and ushered into this universe, okay? 4 months is a luxury and a crime.
Yeah.
So my advice for the listeners is simply
vote Democrat. And
there are many easy things. The first is, yes, vote for people who will enact policies that are better for parents and for mothers and babies. The second is take some food to new parents and do not knock on the door. Do not expect to see a baby. This is the kindest thing that you can do for someone who has just welcomed a baby into the world. Bring them a bag of groceries and do not ring their doorbell. Just send a text that says, there's groceries outside your door. They probably should go in the fridge. That is my advice, because every one of us is going to know someone who has a baby sometime. So bring them some groceries, bake them some dinner. Don't expect to get your baking dish back anytime soon.
what's something about where you are in life right now that if other people knew, it would make things just a little bit easier? And not like, I never got to go to Hogwarts at 11, so please, like, finally send me my letter, Dumbledore. But, like, just what would make things, like, 10% easier for you?
I think I would love for everyone in this world to put more weight into their asking, hey, how are you? Because we're all going to keep doing it. It's a greeting. I now, when I interact with somebody and say, hey, how are you? I am genuinely asking and wanting an answer. I would love if more people would choose to really be asking that question, to really be inquiring, hey, how are you? And don't be afraid of the answer. I think even the kindest, most empathetic person would be caught off guard and maybe not know what the right thing to say is, or just kind of feel the awkwardness of an unexpected answer and stumble. And I think that's okay. But to answer your question, that is what I would love to see more of from people, is not to be afraid of the answer. If you do ask someone how they're doing and their answer isn't good, imagine what you might say next so that you can be ready for that.
That's so important. And I think that how are you doing? Good response dynamic is one of the failings of, I don't know if it's language or just how we use it, because it just needs to be replaced with something like just a hello, right? Because there's such a disconnect between what you're saying there and what your intention is most of the time. Unless, like you just said, like, unless you really do want to know how is that person doing. But otherwise, we need to find new words for what we're really trying to express.
I agree. And I think something you just pointed out is important too, is sometimes, especially speaking from my own place right now of vulnerability, maybe I'm not equipped for that conversation. So maybe I'm choosing to say just hello. instead of asking the empty question. So choosing your greeting in an intentional way so that you are either prepared to assist or listen or, just whatever it is that you can or are willing to do for a person in that moment if they say they're not okay, or keep your conversation to hello. That's okay too. You know what you can bring, the energy that you can bring to a conversation. So I really like that you made that distinction of just being more intentional with our language.
How can people learn more about you and the work that you do, either on your own as a writer and a mom or with Roots and Shoots?
Well, I was just making this joke to somebody earlier. I'm extraordinarily Googleable. And it makes me sigh sometimes. I am very present on the internet. If one types in my name, Adrienne Bermingham, he or she would find their way to a number of things, whether it be the TED Talk from many a year ago, or some of the things that I've written, or work that I do for Jane Goodall. But the real answer I'd like to say is that someday I'm going to write this book. So look for my name on the bookshelf.
When that happens, I won't say if, when that happens, would love to have you back on to talk more.
Thank you. Well, this is me speaking it into the ether. And now I'll just have to.
Adrienne, one last thing. I want to say just how much I've learned from watching you grow in love as a mom to Ozzy and Rudy. I feel like your heart can and has and will move mountains. And please keep sharing your light.
Make me cry. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We did it. You came to the end of another episode of This Should Have Been a Phone Call. So much thanks to Adrienne for stopping by and sharing her story and art with us. If this is your first time listening, there are plenty of other episodes of the show. Just go to phonecallpod.com and you could listen to all of them right now. Please give us a follow at phonecallpod wherever you get your social media. And if you're feeling brave, I always appreciate a good review or comment over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps the show grow, but it also keeps the Dementors from attacking Harry Potter. So I definitely appreciate that. I'll see you next time on This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Oh, and one more thing. I love you. You are enough. Keep going.